Welcome to Immigration Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Big Tech Earnings, September PCE, What to Watch Next Week. Ukrainians, Hong Kongers and Afghans excluded from refugee cap. Teen surfing prodigy Aaron Brooks' Canadian citizenship request denied by feds. GOP push to revoke student visas over Mideast protests draws free speech concerns. We have to deport people more often and faster. Big Tech Earnings, September PCE, What to Watch Next Week. Yahoo! Next week, several big tech companies, including Microsoft, Alphabet, Meta, and Amazon, will be reporting their earnings. Other companies reporting include Coca-Cola, Verizon, Visa, Boeing, T-Mobile, Ford, Hershey, and United Parcel Service. Additionally, the Personal Consumption Expenditures (PCE) index for September will be released, providing further insight into consumer spending. Ukrainians, Hong Kongers and Afghans excluded from refugee cap. Telegraph. The UK government is planning to exclude Ukrainians, Hong Kongers, and some Afghans from its annual cap on refugees under a new scheme to be launched in 2025. The scheme will allow local authorities to set out their capacity to accommodate refugees arriving in the UK via safe and legal routes. The cap will be subject to change each year but will not include the Ukraine visa schemes, the Afghan relocation and assistance policy, or the Hong Kong British National, Overseas, Route or Mandate scheme. Refugee charities have criticized the move, calling for the cap to be abandoned and for the UK to resettle at least 30,000 refugees a year. Teen surfing prodigy Aaron Brooks' Canadian citizenship request denied by feds. CBC. Teenage surfing prodigy Aaron Brooks has been denied Canadian citizenship by the federal government. The 16-year-old, who was born in Texas and grew up in Hawaii, has Canadian ties through her father, who is a dual American-Canadian citizen. Brooks had hoped to secure her citizenship in order to represent Canada at next year's Paris Olympics. However, the delay in citizenship has caused her to miss the Pan American Games in Chile, which offers the winner an Olympic berth. In a letter explaining the decision, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada stated that Brooks is not stateless and that she has not provided services of an exceptional value to Canada. Surf Canada has stated that they intend to appeal the decision to federal court. GOP push to revoke student visas over Mideast protests draws free speech concerns. Washington Post. Former President Donald Trump and other Republican presidential candidates have called for the revocation of student visas and the deportation of foreign nationals who express support for Palestinians or criticize Israel's military response. However, legal experts argue that such moves would violate the First Amendment rights of these individuals. Tensions have erupted on college campuses across the U.S. following Hamas's attack on Israel, with student protests ranging from urging a ceasefire to blaming Israel for Hamas's attack. Some Republican candidates have generalized all protest participants as supporting Hamas, without differentiating between the different reasons for protest. Trump declared that if he returned to the White House, his administration would revoke student visas for radical, anti-American, and anti-Semitic foreigners. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis also expressed support for deporting international students who support Hamas, stating that international students do not have the right to study in the U.S. Legal experts argue that these proposals violate the First Amendment, which protects everyone's right to free speech and association. The proposals from the GOP candidates reflect their increasingly hardline stance on Muslim immigrants and their support for Israel. However, some civil rights advocates warn that these proposals conflate protesters who criticize Israel's response to Hamas's attack or voice concern for Palestinians with those supporting Hamas. The GOP candidates have not provided detailed explanations of how they would reconcile their proposals with the First Amendment or how they would determine which students to classify as anti-Israel or pro-Hamas. We have to deport people more often and faster. Spiegel. In an interview with Der Spiegel, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz discussed his recent trip to Israel and Egypt, where he met with the family members of German hostages who were kidnapped by Hamas and other terror groups in Gaza. Scholz assured the families that Germany is doing everything possible to secure the release of the hostages. He also issued a warning to Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran to avoid becoming involved in the conflict, stating that Germany and the US have sent the same message. When asked about the recent anti-Semitic protests in Germany, Scholz condemned these acts and vowed to protect Jewish life in the country. Scholz also discussed Germany's immigration policies and the need to control irregular migration. He stated that Germany has been paying attention to the issue and is implementing measures to reduce the number of people coming to the country. This includes classifying certain countries as safe countries of origin, strengthening the protection of Europe's external borders, and implementing a new solidarity mechanism in the EU for fair distribution of refugees. Scholz emphasized the need to deport those who have no right to stay in Germany and to speed up deportation procedures. Regarding the rise of right-wing populist parties like the Alternative for Germany, AfD, Scholz acknowledged that many citizens are feeling unsettled and insecure, which creates a fertile ground for such parties. However, he stated that he is opposed to banning the AfD and believes that the impact of the party will subside with time. He also expressed confidence in his government's achievements, particularly in addressing climate change and transitioning to renewable energies. Asylum hotel owners call for protests to stop. BBC. The owners of the Stratey Park Hotel in Carmarthenshire, Wales, have pleaded with protesters to stop demonstrating outside the hotel. The hotel had been proposed as a site to house up to 241 asylum seekers, but the plans were dropped 10 days ago. Despite the decision, protests have continued outside the hotel. In a statement posted on Facebook, the hotel asked why people were continuing to protest if the Home Office had disengaged from any involvement with the hotel and stated that the proposal would never be revisited. The hotel also clarified that it was not for sale and expressed its hope to reopen before the end of the year. The hotel has employed security personnel due to the threat of violence and vandalism. Protesters have been urged to move on so that progress and healing can occur. India making life unbelievably difficult for millions by ordering diplomats out, says Trudeau. CBC. India has revoked diplomatic immunity for dozens of Canadian diplomats, making life difficult for millions of people with ties to India, according to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The move came after India demanded parity in the number of diplomats present in the two countries. India was angered by Trudeau's claim that Indian agents were involved in the murder of a Canadian citizen. Trudeau said India's actions were making it difficult for millions of Canadians of Indian origin. Minister says he misspoke as pressure mounts on NL government over housing claims. CBC. Newfoundland and Labrador Housing Minister Paul Pike has admitted to misspeaking about the number of new homes built in the province, following an investigation by CBC News. Pike originally claimed that 750 new homes had been built in the last 2 years, but data from the Newfoundland and Labrador Housing Corporation showed that only 11 social housing units were available for occupancy. The revelation led to criticism from opposition parties and calls for clarification from Premier Andrew Furey. Furey defended Pike's comments, stating that there were 750 new housing options, which included shelters and supportive units. The opposition parties accused the government of misleading the public and suggested a pattern of questionable claims by the Liberal government. Pike later clarified his comments, stating that while the government had announced 750 new homes, some projects had not yet started due to issues with permitting. He maintained that the government was addressing the housing crisis and working as quickly as possible to build new homes. MP criticized for ridiculous asylum seeker claim. BBC. Conservative MP Jill Mortimer claimed during Prime Minister's questions that her office was besieged by illegal asylum seekers and called for their expulsion. Campaigners have criticized her comments, stating that they fuel racism and hate crimes. The Mary Thompson Fund, which supports refugees, said Mortimer's remarks were ridiculous and called for her to look after people as part of her duty and responsibility. Mortimer defended her comments, stating that she spoke from experience and that her team had encountered instances where her female office manager had been alone with 20 men trying to enter the office. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 dimensions. It's time for our weekly roundup of news from around the world. Let's dive in. In the tech world, we have some big earnings reports to look forward to next week. Microsoft, Alphabet, Meta, and Amazon will be sharing their financial results, giving us a glimpse into the health of the tech industry. We'll also be keeping an eye on the September PCE index, which will shed light on consumer spending. Will the tech giants continue to dominate, or will we see some surprises? Stay tuned. Moving on to the UK, the government has announced plans to exclude Ukrainians, Hong Kongers, and some Afghans from its annual cap on refugees starting in 2025. Refugee charities are not happy with this decision, calling for the cap to be abandoned and for the UK to resettle more refugees each year. It's a controversial move that will surely spark debate. In sports news, teenage surfing prodigy Erin Brooks has been denied Canadian citizenship, dashing her dreams of representing Canada at the Paris Olympics. Immigration authorities cited reasons such as not being stateless and not providing services of exceptional value to Canada. Surf Canada plans to appeal the decision, but it's a tough blow for Brooks and her Olympic aspirations. Meanwhile, in the US, some Republican presidential candidates are calling for the revocation of student visas and the deportation of foreign nationals who express support for Palestinians or criticize Israel's military response. Legal experts argue that such moves would violate the First Amendment rights of these individuals. It's a complex issue that highlights the tensions surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and free speech rights in the US. Over in Germany, Chancellor Olaf Scholz has warned Hezbollah and Iran to stay out of the conflict in the Middle East, following his visit to Israel and Egypt. He also discussed Germany's immigration policies, emphasizing the need to control irregular migration and speed up deportation procedures. It's a challenging task, but Scholz is determined to address the issue. In Wales, the owners of the Stratey Park Hotel are pleading with protesters to stop demonstrating outside their establishment. The hotel was proposed as a site to house asylum seekers, but the plans were dropped. Despite this, protests have continued, causing distress to the hotel owners. It's a difficult situation that highlights the challenges surrounding immigration and public sentiment. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has criticized India for revoking diplomatic immunity for Canadian diplomats. Trudeau claims that India's actions are making life difficult for millions of Canadians of Indian origin. It's a tense situation that underscores the complexities of diplomatic relations. In local politics, Newfoundland and Labrador Housing Minister Paul Pike has admitted to misspeaking about the number of new homes built in the province. The revelation has led to criticism from opposition parties and calls for clarification. It's another example of the challenges faced by governments in addressing housing crises. And finally, in the UK, Conservative MP Jill Mortimer has come under fire for her comments about asylum seekers. Campaigners have criticized her remarks, saying they fuel racism and hate crimes. It's a reminder of the importance of responsible language and the need to foster understanding and compassion. That's all for this week's news roundup. Remember, these stories are just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to explore and discuss. So, what are your thoughts on these topics? Do you have any questions or insights? I'm here to listen and engage with you, so let's start a conversation. What's on your mind? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.